Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nilanjan Sarkar, and I am Deputy Director of the South Asia Centre at the London School of Economics. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming this afternoon. Thank you for turning up in such huge numbers. Thank you also for standing and not sitting, but we're really sorry that we've run out of seats. This afternoon is a very special occasion for a lot of us at LSE for several reasons. I will only cite two of them today. They're very important because it is a meeting to announce the LSE Research and Education Foundation India, and at this venue, which is not just the India International Centre, but the CD Deshmukh Auditorium over here. For those of you who may not know, the IIC was born from a conversation between then Vice President and later President, Dr. Dr. Radhakrishnan, and the American philanthropist John Davison Rockefeller III. The idea of the center came from the International House of Japan in Tokyo, and the IIC was also set up on similar lines to, quote, quickening and deepening of true and thoughtful understanding between peoples of nations. A committee of eminent educationists and thought leaders of the day came together, led by then chairman of the University Grants Commission, Professor Chintaman Dwarkanath Deshmukh, hence CD Deshmukh. It was Dr. Deshmukh who invited the American architect Joseph Allen Stein, leader and specialist of local modern architecture, and after whom the lane to my immediate left was named after he died in 2001, to design the buildings of the India International Centre, which opened in 1962. One question that Dr. Deshmukh grappled with, and this is instructive, especially for all of you who are leading higher education institutions now, is how would the India International Centre be funded? And who was going to provide that funding? The answer he found is important because unlike the International House in Japan, which was funded by businessmen and journalists, Deshmukh decided that the IIC would be funded, and I quote, it would be a pooled guest house of universities of the world in the heart of the city. Which brings me to the other special reason why we are in this auditorium this afternoon. From the start, the India International Centre has been the venue for important conversations about universities and has invited university leaders to this place. And so it was that among the very early visitors was the economist and educator Sir Sidney Kane, also director of the London School of Economics at the time. He was a director between 1957 and 1967, and visited the IIC in 1964 to speak at a seminar on interdisciplinary studies and social change. Our choice of this venue for our meeting thus builds on a long history of association and interaction between LSE and India. The LSE India Foundation, of which you will hear more shortly, is another step in that direction. And what better way to do it than to have two eminent alumni of LSE, along with many others in the audience, some soon to be, we hope, and all of you present this afternoon. It is now my very pleasant task to introduce the three eminent people sitting to my left on the stage. Professor Larry Kramer is President and Vice Chancellor of the London School of Economics and Political Science. Mr. Nasser Munjee is an alumnus of LSE, graduating with a master's in economics in 1975. He is also chair of the Senior Advisory Board of the LSE South Asia Centre, where I am deputy director. Mr. Gopal Sankaranarayanan is also an alumnus, completing his LLM in 2002 and is currently senior advocate in the Supreme Court of India. Now, before I hand over to Nasser, who will carry on the proceedings of this afternoon, I just wanted to explain how we have curated this meeting, because it is a meeting. As we believe we are in a gathering of equals, we have kept this meeting free-flowing and informal. Nasser will engage both Larry and Gopal in conversation about LSE and India. We will stop at 4 p.m. or thereabouts, and thereafter, everyone will have the chance to interact outside in the foyer over tea and refreshments. Our stewards, who are in red t-shirts, will show you the way there. Thank you. Nasser, please start.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's so nice to see some young faces and I know a lot of you are going to be potential students at LSE. So again, let me warmly welcome Larry to India and to this meeting, as well as Gopal. Thank you very much for being here. I'm told we have had an overwhelming response. So I think there are a lot of people standing too, but I don't know whether you can make yourselves comfortable by finding some place to sit. I was at LSE in 71 to 75 and did my bachelor's and master's, and then went on to the University of Chicago. That was the heyday of monetarism, and Harry Johnson used to teach at LSE. But today I'm here as the chairman of the South Asia Center, which we began 10 years ago. It's actually a decade since we started. And I remember going to Ratan Tata here, saying that we'd like you to chair the South Asia Center, and we also require some funding. And his response to me was, I will not chair it. I don't now chair the issue, but if you chair it, I will fund it, and I will also be a part of the board. So that's the only reason why I'm here, and it's been a 10-year journey, and I think we've done a huge amount during that time. And I believe today we are also launching the Research and Education Foundation, which is a Section 8 that we set up some years ago. So I'm delighted that that's going to happen today. So let me begin by asking both our guests here, Larry and Gopal, to tell us something about themselves. Gopal as an alumni, and Larry as the new director.
Larry, why don't you? I don't know where to start. I do also want to echo the thank you, though. It's overwhelming to see so many people and really, really heartening. India is a very important country for us at LSE, and to get this kind of response is just really, really wonderful. So thank you all for coming. I'm relatively new to LSE. I've only been there a year. Basically, I grew up in Chicago in a kind of lower middle class, blue collar area. Got into an Ivy League college, kind of by mistake on their part, and discovered a world of ideas that really, really drew me in. And so decided I wanted to be an academic, took a few years to find a field, stumbled equally into law, although in that case it was because my mother nagged me to go to law school, and I went and discovered that I loved it, much to my surprise. I'm happy to talk about that while you will, for all of those who are interested. But then stayed in as a legal academic and had a really, really rewarding career that took me through several universities. I started at the University of Chicago, then the University of Michigan, NYU, then I was the dean of the law school at Stanford, and I took a detour for about 10 years and moved into the world of philanthropy and ran a foundation. And that was a great, wonderful experience as well, but after 10 years, I really missed being in the university and being in a world of ideas and the people in the university, and I missed students and all of the things that make it such a wonderful thing. So when the opportunity to return arose, when LSE called and asked if I was interested, I jumped at it and got very lucky, and it has been a very wonderful decision. So.
We warmly welcome you to LSE. Gopal?
Yeah, so I mean, just to answer your question about the large number of registrants and people who are here, I think the answer for that partly falls in the fact that there are two distinguished gentlemen on the stage, and there is the third guy. So they all want to know, who is this third guy? Why is he on stage with these two? So I started in Bangalore. I did my school and my college there, and wound my way to LSE, where I did my master's immediately after finished law. And much like Larry's mom, my mom also kicked me downstairs to do law, because in India, as was the case in those years, at least if you weren't very good at the sciences, you had very few options available. Now, of course, it's really the highbrow humanities kids who get into law school. So if I had to give it a second shot, I wouldn't even get admission into any of those colleges. So, and then I went to the LSE, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. I'll address that later, why I went there. And I loved that 1 year, and I've always been very, very involved with sports. It's an easy thing to say, especially when you're not very good at it. But I wanted to be at a place where I could play something, and LSE had an excellent hockey team, which I did play for when I was at the LSE. And I loved that time there. It was in, right in the heart of London, and I loved that experience in being one of the great cities in the world and being there for a year. But I was very clear that I'd be coming back to work here. I wanted to be in the courts, and particularly at the Supreme Court here. And that's what I've been doing. I do a variety of constitutional, civil, criminal, at the appellate level. I don't know how familiar Larry is with this, but average lawyers in India do about 20 times the workload that our contemporaries elsewhere do. So we're doing a large number of cases. So we're all jack of all trades. So I do a variety of work across the board, and I was designated as a senior counsel, which is the equivalent of a QC, a few years ago by the Supreme Court. And that's where I came rushing from this afternoon. I was afraid that I'd be late.
Don't believe him. He's as eminent as anybody in this group. So, I think let's start off by this whole question of higher education. When I was at LSE, we had the old library, and we had to Xerox our articles, from various books, etc., and the horrible Xerox machines, etc. So that's the sort of situation we're in. Today, in the age of AI and the way things are changing and the sheer knowledge available to everybody online, how does one see higher education evolving as we move forward? So in a sense, I'm asking, is there some vision for LSE specifically as we move forward?
Sure, thank you. It's actually a great question. I think the Xerox machine was still new when we were in college. It was mimeographs. So what's been interesting, and I was talking about this earlier with some counselors from some of the high schools around here, the growth of technology actually has reached the point where the kind of narrow technical skills are less valuable, because those can be done for you. And so, so the key in education is to teach, what I think of as a set of deeper learning skills. So essentially, we need to teach people that you need domain knowledge. You do need to know an area in which you're going to work, and you need some depth. But it has to be taught in a way that really teaches you essentially, I think, of 5 qualities, which is critical thinking, problem solving, learning to learn, because you're going to have to keep learning on your own, communication and collaboration. And that set of skills are what you're going to need no matter what career you go into. Many of the jobs that many of the younger people here will hold in the future don't exist yet. And they're going to come into being over the next few years. And so we need to prepare people with a set of trans-substantive skills that technologies will not be able to provide for them, so that they can use the technologies properly. So that's on the educational side. And then, to be honest, if you think about the major problems facing the world today, all of them, they are all social science problems, right? We're not going to invent our way out of these problems. The inventions may themselves be the problem, or whether they are or not will depend on how we deploy them. So really, if you think about whether it's the problem of the popular government, problem of how to manage the economy, sustainability, inequalities, or the new technologies, which are the sort of 5 themes around which we're building, they're questions of economics and law and social policy and psychology and sociology. It's how are we going to manage these? They're social science problems. So it's really taking advantage of the strengths of the school as the place that actually is addressing the real issues that people need to face, and then providing students with the kind of thinking that they're going to need in order to successfully tackle them.
Absolutely, and it's this whole analytical frame of mind that's required. But can I just follow up on that in terms of India and South Asia, because we're here. Do we see a much greater engagement by LSE in this region?
Yeah. So on this one, I actually made some notes because I knew we were going to talk about it because there's so many things that I just wanted to make sure I wouldn't miss them all. And the thing is, LSE's engagement with India in particular is almost as old as LSE. Ralph Dahrendorf wrote a history of the school he wrote it in the 90s and described the relationship between LSE and India as a story of soulmates. Our engagement with the country began as early as 1912 when the Tata Family Trust helped launch what has become the Department of Social Policy, which is a kind of almost a stem cell department for things that go on. And the engagement has been close ever since. So it's been a steady stream of students, including some very famous ones. Mr. Ambedkar went here, President Narayan. One of our directors was I.G. Patel, and so so that kind of engagement. And so the connections and the engagement really is on all of the different things that we do. The South Asia Center has been one of the places, but really only one. So there's research happening in almost every department in India or working with Indian scholars. And I sort of was going to make a list, but I thought, you know what I mean, that'll actually get a little boring. But trust me, whatever you're interested in, there's something happening there that connects to this country because there's so much happening here. In addition, we have increasingly in recent years, and we want to really expand these, been developing partnerships with the major Indian universities, designed both to enable students to go back and forth, spend some time in both countries, and faculty as well. And those kinds of exchanges, I think, are really quite important. While working on our end to make sure that the students from India who come to LSE nevertheless get the full experience of being there, because there's nothing quite like it in the sense of there's students. If you go to a school in another country, you'll engage with students from that country, and that's better than nothing. But if you come to LSE, you're going to engage with students from upwards of 140 to 150 different countries. It's a truly global institution, and that really shapes the experience that students have. You mentioned it. I should just say yes. We were going to announce, after a prolonged effort, and with the assistance of Mr. Abhilash Pujal, who is here somewhere. There he is.
Yeah, he is.
Thank you so much. We're just now announcing the launch of a LSE Research and Education Foundation, which is going to be a device that we can use to increase the work here, in particular scholarships for students and support for research exchanges and work across the two countries. We've got the first gift for it, which has come in from Tata Trust, which will be used for scholarships for students. But we have plans for the future to really deepen all of these engagements. So, what I want to say is there's no simple answer to that because it's a kind of pervasive partnership across essentially everything that we do at the university. Because, again, what's happening in this country is, for a global university, is so important to be engaged with actively.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. That's very encouraging to see, and I hope we see you more often.
I want to come at least annually. One of the challenges, by the way, I will say about being at LSE is we do have alumni everywhere in the world, and so I have to get around everywhere. But India is so important that I want to come here at least annually.
And to students who are going to LSE, what I loved about it was your flexibility to engage in so many things that you're interested in outside your specific area. I was in monetary economics, but I did philosophy of science with Karl Popper, and it's an amazing place just to imbibe things of interest to you. Okay, so let me come to Gopal. Gopal I've left you a little alone.
No, not at all. It's fascinating to hear this.
But it is the 75th anniversary of our independence and of the Constitution. How is it held up to the test of time?
I've always been optimistic about how the Constitution has worked in India because, we had borrowed from many constitutions across the world, written ones, unwritten ones, like the one in the UK, and it was an experiment. I don't think at the time that they kicked it off, and Mr. Ambedkar, of course, having come from LSE, his background in economics and in social sciences and in law, very truly he was a very forward-thinking and evolved man. So I think the draft of B.N. Rao's that he worked on with those in the Constituent Assembly, I think brought forward a kind of document which has continued to be an experiment. I think that's the way they looked at it then, and it wasn't going to be the final word on anything. So over the years, we've had many challenges, and those challenges are really about trying to create a balance. I've seen many countries over the years, mature democracies, immature ones, go through the very same flashpoints. Flashpoints considering rights of individuals, about very strong elected governments, and the executive trying to overhaul them by using their control of the legislature, much as we see apprehensions today in Trump's US. But it's out of that that safeguards come. Out of that you expect the opposition, the media, and the judiciary to stand up. And we've seen that in India's evolution, in Indian constitutional evolution. I'm very optimistic that that document, which had many people castigating it over the years, saying that it falls short, but judicial evolution and a mix of, I think, some mature administrative approaches have helped us take care of new challenges that have come. So I'm optimistic that India's constitution will stand for many more years. It'll need its tweaks, and eventually it's in the hands of we the people, something we find common to all these constitutions. And I'm very happy that it's a written one.
Yeah.
It's something I want to touch upon, because the UK not having a written constitution, I think, has led to certain issues arising which could normally be public law or constitutional issues. And those issues aren't being addressed in the best way possible. You've seen that with immigration in the UK, in Europe, issues of faith, in a very strange kind of scenario, though the US and the UK had much older constitutions than ours. Can you hear me? Yeah, had much older constitutions than ours. India's constitution, right from the get-go, permitted the Indian courts to step in and strike down legislation, which included amendments to the constitution itself. That's very unusual.
Yeah.
The US Constitution doesn't expressly give that power. There is the power of judicial review, and it took many years for them to start exercising that. And even the UK Constitution doesn't really in precedence talk about it. It's only in 1998 with the UK Human Rights Act that they first gave their own courts the power to strike down a law. So I think in many ways we are ahead of the curve on a large bunch of things, but we are evolving as other constitutions elsewhere. So I'm quite happy with the constitution as it is.
Yeah, I would agree. It's sort of a backbone around which institutions are built,
Yes.
and the checks and balances that are built in. But I think an issue that you raise is this whole issue between a written constitution and not having a written constitution. Larry, any comments on that?
Well, I think I have a slightly different view on this. And this is just, from, I actually have studied and taught the Indian Constitution. I did comparative constitutionalism. One of the and I think it's actually quite remarkable. What's remarkable about it is something that you touched on, which is the quickness with which a strong constitutional culture developed. So, I think all constitutions are customary law, but some of them are refracted through a text. So it's an ongoing understanding of the text that people use to work through the issues that are, they're all always constantly evolving. That's the nature of constitutionalism. And the texts can provide a useful reference. I think the case of the UK shows they don't necessarily have to, but that even the strongest constitutional system will have problems. And this is why ultimately what you're hoping you can get out of a constitution, whether written or unwritten, is a constitutional culture in which the people of the country basically are going to hold the government to stay within the boundaries of what the Constitution sets out. And so the text can help with that because it's a reference point, but as I think you're seeing in the United States, it doesn't necessarily. And on the other hand, the length of with which the UK with a completely customary constitution has stayed within its limits are also pretty interesting. So at the end of the day, it's how do you generate a good, strong constitutional culture And as I say, I think India has done a kind of remarkable job given the speed with which it emerged. And the complexity, by the way. The Indian Constitution is incredibly complicated. The American Constitution is 4 pages long. And so as I say, I think but it's ultimately a cultural question, a legal culture.
Yeah. Any comment on that?
No, nothing. I would, of course, recommend to all law students here and others to try and get your hands on Larry's book, which was 2004, was it?
Yeah.
Yes. A fantastic book which goes through the history of American Constitution making and the documents that went into it, and the very interesting issues that arose among the Republicans and the original founders of America, and the entire debate about how different flashpoints and how they are dealt with. I think it's useful for us to understand that context, but like you said, it is extremely culturally specific. So.
Can I just sort of come to studying law at LSE? I know that University of Chicago, for example, had a very strong ideological bent of neoliberalism. And the law department, I think you studied there, was also part of this sort of spirit in which one was taught. At LSE, is there an overarching principle on which we could sort of explain to students why LSE for law?
Yeah, sure. By the way, you're right about, I was at the University of Chicago as that set of ideas were coming into play. And it was an interest, students hated it. It was really interesting. I think the distinguishing characteristic for LSE comes again from the distinguishing characteristic of LSE, which is to say, if you study law at LSE, you'll get a good, solid technical education on the being a lawyer parts, how to read cases, how to understand the concepts. But our faculty is really grounded deeply in the social sciences. So it's really probably the best place to get an understanding of law as a sociological phenomenon and the way in which it will play out in other kinds of careers, whatever you do. Law is a wonderful subject to study no matter what you end up doing. But understanding not just how to use it technically, but how to see how it fits in and integrates with all of the other things, whether it's economics or politics, is something. And that's I think really the strength of the LSE faculty.
Can I comment on that? It's not usually the first thing you think of when you think of the LSE, that there's law faculty there. And I think it's gone through its stage of first being just called London School of Economics and then political science, and I think has moved on, or is it still only LSE and political science? So it doesn't project itself to the world as a place where you get legal education. And that was one of the first reservations I had when I was applying. And so I did do a little bit of research to find out who are the people who teach there. One of the subjects that we were taught, and I think I was in a nascent stage in the law schools in India, where we were being taught feminist legal theory. It was seen as this very strange concept, and most people were not very quick at embracing it. And as you can imagine, on campuses, liberal arts campuses like ours, you'd find this very clear divide: those who want to stick with the status quo, those who are very unsure about what it's all about. And there are those who embrace it without fully understanding it yet. So one of the books was by Nicola Lacey, who was a professor at LSE at that time. And her approach to criminology is what I found interesting, because it's a subject very close to my heart. Criminal theory, how you go about creating offenses, how you punish, what are the degrees, and it's very, very unique about how different countries look at them. Particularly at the time when you have debates about the death penalty and abolition and things like that. So India retains it. Many states in the US retain it. The UK has, of course, abolished it. So it was in that light that I wanted to go and study, and I saw that Nikki Lacey was teaching there, and there was also Professor Rob Reiner, who was the editor of the Oxford Handbook of Criminology. So I said, look, there are two of these people there. There's a good chance that they wouldn't have just come to an institution unless the law faculty is good and they have good contemporaries to work with. And when I wound up there, among the subjects I chose, because I'm very clear that I was coming back to India and I was going to practice in the courts. So I wanted to learn subjects. I know it's a little bizarre, but I want to learn subjects which I would have absolutely no reason to apply when I'm practicing here. So I want to learn something very different from what I was going to do. So international law of armed conflict appealed to me. Because we're just coming off the back of the Iraq issues. September 11th had just happened a week before I landed in LSE, and I had to make those choices. And Afghanistan and Iraq and all these issues were happening. So I chose that subject, and I had the best professor I've ever had in my life, Professor Christopher Greenwood, who he was a man, and I didn't know how teachers and professors were able to do this with the incredible amount of workload they have, the kind of discipline demanded of them. Professor Greenwood used to not only be a QC in the British courts, he used to edit the international law reviews, which were Lauterpact and Greenwood. It's a whole bunch of reviews of all judgments, and he used to edit them. He used to write a couple of well-researched, very detailed, peer-reviewed articles every year. He used to teach about 3 or 4 courses at the LSE and elsewhere. And he used to also appear before the International Court of Justice and argue cases. And he used to travel the world teaching. Any one of these can be a full-time occupation, but this man held down all. Apart from which, his knowledge of arts and cinema and international relations, all were imbued into some of the most majestic classes I had, where he had wit and humor and kept you interested. He later, after I left, maybe because I left, became a member of the International Court of Justice and dispensed justice from there. Christine Chinkin, also, who was a professor there, made her way, I think, as an ad hoc judge of the ICJ at some point. I just found it amazing, and I don't know if that message went out well enough, that LSE's faculty on law was amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. It's only when I went there that I began to realize that not only the faculty, but also the peer group. So I had, in my policing class, I had a couple of classmates who were 2 policemen from Karachi, Pakistan. And again, we were just coming off the back of one of our usual skirmishes. The Kargil War had taken place. And I found them, they would refer to Kashmir as Azad Kashmir, which is free Kashmir. And for us, it was Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. But it was wonderful to have engagements with people like that you wouldn't normally meet in dialogues. And like Larry was saying, you have 150 different nationalities represented. I think a large number of the faculty and the students come to LSE because it's in London. While it's great to be in Oxford and Cambridge and Warwick and Durham and all the rural polytechnics, as our hockey team used to refer to them as, and it's beautiful and it's big campuses, etc. LSE has the advantage of having practitioners who find it very easy to come on campus, teach, and then go away doing whatever else they were doing. Partners from law firms, etc. And at that time, I think the last year of the University of London as such, LSE being part of the University of London. So we had faculty from the other colleges as well, from King's and Queen Mary, etc., etc. So for me, I think it's LSE's best kept secret, which shouldn't be a best kept secret.
That's interesting to know, right?
Oh, sorry,
well,
one more. I'm sorry, I'm just going on too long.
Yeah, please do.
Which is that at one of the libraries, I think right at the top, I don't know, I used to go and sit there with a German student who used to roll cigarettes, and it had a huge portrait of Ambedkar on the wall. And for an Indian young law student coming in there and finding Ambedkar's portrait sitting right there, where all the English profs had small little portraits, you're like, wow, this is great. And it's only later, when I came back, I joined the chambers of Mr. K.K. Venugopal, who was still recently the Attorney General of India, one of our very highly revered lawyers. His father is M.K. Nambiar. So M.K. Nambiar and Nani Palkhiwala are 2 of the great constitutional lawyers of India. Nambiar, in fact, argued the first big case immediately on our constitution coming in 75 years ago. It was a preventive detention case which laid down many principles. The reason I mentioned Nambiar is because Nambiar went to the LSE in 1931, and he taught public law and administrative law at LSE. And so we find that the architect of our constitution, Ambedkar, and one of our greatest constitutional lawyers, Nambiar, both went coincidentally to the LSE. One more reason for LSE to be a great place for public lawyers.
I just want to offer, this is a thought for all the prospective students. And this is, what I'm going to say is true whether you go to LSE or not, although you should come to LSE if you've got the offer. I think the way to think about legal education, and one of the advantages of a school like ours, the first year of law school, you're not actually training to be a lawyer, you're training to be a law student. So the first year is going to lay down a set of foundational skills, what we refer to as thinking like a lawyer, because there's a really pretty distinctive way in which to approach problems. And then in the second and third year with that, you can learn how to be a lawyer. But that means learning not just how to think like a lawyer, but also learning how to think like a client. And so that's where the advantage is to begin to think about taking classes in the whole university. And to think about what kind of lawyer you want to be. And if you want to be a business lawyer, then you're going to take certain kinds of classes. If you want to be an intellectual property lawyer, then a different kind, outside the school as well as inside. So take advantage of the whole university, because the beauty of law is that it really does engage with anything and everything that's out there. So I wouldn't get that chance to do that speech again. I'm giving it to you while you're here.
Good. One final question from me, which has going away from what we've been discussing, is that, you know, in a sense, when you think about it, we're living in an age of tectonic change. Everything is changing. The Bretton Woods system is now collapsing. You have geopolitics changing the whole instruments of power in the world. You have a system of rules-based order which took 70 years to develop. And now you're seeing everything unraveling without a view of where we might be going. We have the rise of nationalism, protectionism throughout the world. We have this whole issue of international law, and how does international law apply, and who makes it effective? In this sort of scenario, what's the role of a university? I mean, how do we think through these issues, and is there something we can put on the table to start a different dialogue?
I'm going to let you take that one first.
Well, I've always felt that university campuses are places where you can pretty much say anything. I say this much to my detriment, because my experiences on university campuses in India have been that they want to come down on you heavily if you take views contrary to what the administration's views are. But the ideal university campus is one where the most radical, extreme opinions are formulated and expressed. Because I feel that only if you have the extreme opinions viewed can you at least come at some kind of rational, objective position, which could be a meeting point for all sides. And I think it's also a time of idealism. So when you're young, you have these big plans. I mean, cynicism sets in perhaps later. Like they say, when you're young, you're a communist for a large part. And I think you have these ideas of how you can change the world. And that's why we've seen in campuses across the world. I mean, of course, the most voluble ones are the ones in the US, so which hosts, I think, some of the greatest campuses in the world. Where on things like Palestine, etc., you've seen the way the administration has reacted and how the students have felt really strongly about things. So I feel it's necessary for administrations, Larry, you're listening? For administrations to be very, very tolerant about extreme views which don't align with your own. I know Larry will be that because he's a lawyer, so he's going to understand extreme positions. But I think, and this goes back to what he was saying about thinking like a lawyer, those who are not trained in law have a tendency to react immediately to the first piece of information that comes your way. And when you live in an age of a media glut and so much social media information, you go with the first thing that comes into your feed if you're on social media, and you get influenced by that. And then trying to dislodge that becomes difficult. So the kind of patience that's required, the deep reading, all of this requires time. And it's usually on university campuses that as students you have time. You can take your time to understand that. I think all this is important, especially when we have so many conflict situations at the international level across the world, because it informs better opinion making, better leadership at a later stage.
So I want to offer two answers, but one is builds on, builds on that point, and I've already had to live this. There's an interesting thing. If you sit in my position, say as a vice chancellor, and I'm guessing if there are others here, on any given week, I will get demands from one side or another on almost every issue. They don't come every week, every issue, but whether it is what's happening in the Middle East, whether it's something to do with race or gender or sexual identity, whether it's India or any number of conflicts, there will be somebody telling me that we have to disinvite somebody, shut down some speech, that it's an outrage that we're allowing it, and so on. And it's a really interesting development that is more recent than people think, where the immediate impetus on speech that you hate and think is profoundly wrong is to think that the thing you need to do is stop it. Now, my own view is, at the very least, university campuses have to be different. They have to be the space that preserves and really forces students to confront things that they really upset them and really disturb them. And if for no other reason, then they're going to confront those when they go out from the university. And we have an opportunity at least to try and get people to do the best they can, if not to change their minds, certainly to understand, and at very least to be capable of dealing with things that upset them. So my opening speech to students, which if you come, you'll hear it's recorded, is you should expect to encounter ideas that deeply upset you, and if you don't, we're failing you. It's important. We want that to happen to all of you. So I do agree with that part. There's another fact, though, that I think is really interesting about universities, because you started with the way in which the world is changing, and it is changing profoundly today. What I can't tell, what none of us knows, is whether it's a change like the change from, say, social welfare to neoliberalism, or like the change from the Industrial Revolution, or like the collapse of the Roman Empire. Right? That is to say, the scope and importance of it is unclear to us at this point, and which makes it both frightening and challenging. But one of the interesting things is the one institution that has existed through all of those is the university. Universities are thousands of years old. I did a debate once with somebody who basically made the argument against endowments. This was in the foundation philanthropy context. And he basically was arguing that endowing an institution would never work because things change and you need to have new institutions. And I pointed out to him universities which have been around for several thousand years managing to reinvent themselves. So I think there is a central role for the university, whichever one of those things it turns out to be, and it comes from preserving that space for people to come and learn and face the hardest issues, but also imbuing them a set of values that come with basically human reason and the ability to think through, think about, and a set of values that do include the notion of equality, that we can't think about. We have to think about other people like ourselves, even if they're not like us, and so on. So that set of ideas that are going to be what it's going to take to make our way through this no matter what. So that's the most important thing that universities do, I think, and preserve long-term values.
Sure, in a sense, the role of the university becomes even stronger in a period of turbulence.
Which is why, by the way, universities are almost always the first, what's happening in the US, the first institution you attack when you want to undo something.
Okay, Niranjan, sorry.
I want to say, I think what you said is fascinating about the cohort that you take into universities. You're failing your students unless you're getting such extreme views from them. That means you're doing well in just bringing out all points of view.
Yeah. Turns out to be very difficult, of course.
Yes,
Nobody believes in free speech.
That's right.
Okay, Niranjan, we got a few minutes. Do you want to?
Shall we wrap up and start talking to everyone, or you have more questions? I was just standing there and listening and thinking that one of the things one learns when one studies history, like I did, is that you can never time lawyers. Because either they're saying a lot or they're speaking too fast. So I had timed everything to 4 o'clock, so we have 10 more minutes. You can ask more questions.
Do we do questions for the audience?
Or Larry, if there's something you'd like to say.
Let's ask the audience if they have any questions.
Okay. Shall we do that? Does anyone have particular questions? So let me tell you what's going to happen after this, is that we're all going to move outside. I have a very good excuse to move all of you outside because there's another event that's going to happen over here. So but we have a lot of time to talk outside. In the foyer, there's tea and refreshments for everyone. We could do a few questions here, and then we can continue talking outside. I have a few announcements to make towards the end, but if there are pressing questions you can't hold off on. Karnveer is an alumnus, so I'm not going to let him ask a question. Oh, there's a gentleman at the far corner there. Are you going to speak loudly? Yeah? Okay, hold on. You need a microphone, otherwise we can't record it.
Yeah, we
If you
can hear.
speak very loudly, we can hear you.
Sorry, I think they need it for the recording.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this discussion. Dear Professor Kramer, with your expertise in federalism and separation of powers, how do you perceive the challenges and opportunities in shaping central authority and state autonomy in federal structures, especially in the emerging economics like India? In India, now currently, the debate around federalism is more intense than ever.
Can we stop at the question and let him answer?
Sorry, sir?
I said, can we stop? You've asked the question. Shall we just stop at that and then he can speak?
So the question, though,
What-
is what's our role in shaping the allocation between central and decentralized?
Yeah, in a federal
What
structure.
lessons can be drawn
Yeah.
from other federal system in managing such tensions happening in India, the conflicts between union and state governments?
So your knowledge of the US and
Just as a little bit of a background, Larry, we have been having situations because we have a very strong central government in place at the moment, and we have had in several states which don't have the same political party aligned. We have had instances of enforcement of federal investigating authorities coming in, and where the governors of those states, who are controlled by the central government, are effectively doing things against the interest of that particular state government. So that's perhaps the background in which the question.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm certainly not going to step into the middle of that one, knowing as little as I do about Indian politics. But what I would say, particularly, though, is it's a problem that, for instance, that is a problem that's completely common to any and all federal systems, right? I mean, the interesting thing, if you look at American constitutional history, that was the problem that actually drove the U.S. Constitution. It was trying to figure out how to achieve the balance, because traditionally it was always the local governments, the states, that destroyed the central government. That was the historical experience. And then the question was, how do we create some ability for the central government to actually protect itself? And then it turns out to be the problem can often be that the central government becomes too strong. So what I think our role is, and my role would be, is actually trying to get, in the case of students, or if it's in my scholarship, people who are working on it, to understand the set of considerations that go into each, right? So there are arguments to have a strong federal government, and there are arguments to have strong state governments, and you need to understand what the reasons are for each, so that when the challenges come, you have the ability to push back, right? This is a situation where the central government should have that kind of authority, or this is a situation where the central government should be constrained. And then you have a different set of issues, which is whether your political structures enable that. So one of the most understudied areas of constitutional law everywhere is the political party, because most constitutions were written without thinking about them, even though they turn out to be every bit as important as an institution. Again, I wrote a whole book on this, which is to say the American founders, when they wrote the Constitution, the party didn't exist. They didn't imagine it. And they discovered very quickly that they needed them, that you can't run a constitutional system without parties, but that you have to then think about how to build them into your constitutional structure in the same way. These are all things we can teach, and then they provide the basis for having the kinds of arguments that you're going to have in this country or any other.
I think,
sorry?
no, do we have time?
Shall we
I
stop,
think
because
we
it'll
should
take
stop.
us 5 minutes to leave, and I have a few things to say. But you're very welcome to come out and speak with all of us. Let me begin with thanking all of you. I want to particularly thank people who've been standing. Thank you very much. It's not easy to do, and it's very, very kind and generous of you. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Before I end, I do want to say that all of you who got a seat would have got these 2 pieces of paper. This gives you all the details of the India Foundation, and Abhilash Puljal, who's the India director, is sitting right here and will be outside. And this gives you the QR codes for various kinds of questions that you may have if you would like to apply to LSE, or you're going to LSE, or want information, and so on and so forth. The other way of saying the same thing is, don't ask us these questions. That's the other way of saying the same thing. But no, this says, I've looked at each and every QR code. I've checked each and every QR code. There's a lot of information. It has been produced by the admissions department and given to us. So please do. We do have 2 of our colleagues from LSE Careers who are sitting right in front and who will also be over there. It is now my very pleasant task to thank all of you. And of course, we do hope to engage with all of you via the foundation as we look ahead. I want to thank Nasser, who continues to do everything for us and for our center every time we reach out to him, which is actually quite frequently. I want to thank Gopal Sankaranarayanan for making the time. You have a very busy schedule, but I'm not going to not be able to say that I have been one of the few, I consider few, Indian students who has been lucky to study in a variety of institutions, both in India and in the United Kingdom. And I have today noted that for my 1 year at St. Antony's College in Oxford, I will know I studied at a polytechnic. So that I will definitely know. And there is an unedited recording of this, so you cannot hold it against me. I do want to thank our 4 lovely stewards. They've really taken time out, these lovely people in red t-shirts, Yashika Daga, Ahana Jaiswal, Ananya Puljal, and Annie Srivastav, who have helped us manage this so wonderfully this afternoon, and who have really volunteered their time for reasons best known to them. So thank you very much. May I now invite all of you to join us outside. When you go out, you just have to turn right, and you'll see there's tea and coffee in the foyer towards the garden. It's there for everyone. Please do join us, and we'll join you over there shortly. Thank you, and good afternoon.